Okay, guys, we'll take a few questions. Yeah, go ahead.
We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of this really tragic plane crash in DC. Should Americans be afraid to fly while it's shut down?
No, I don't think Americans should be afraid to fly because we've got great airline professionals who are keeping the safest aviation industry in the world afloat, but they're doing it with incredible stress. What I worry more about is that if you have, let's say, a pilot who's now missed 2 paychecks, who's now telling his kids that they can't do things that they'd like to do, who's now worried about feeding his family, maybe that guy doesn't show up to work, maybe he goes and gets a different job. That means greater delays for the American people. I worry about the air traffic controller who now has missed 2 paychecks, who's got to pay his credit card bill or his mortgage, but can't pay both, and decides, you know what, this industry is not for me. The Secretary of Transportation made a great point in private. I'm going to steal it right now because we got to get people into the air traffic control industry. We had a shortage of 2,000 people. How many of those people look to the future, see that congressional Democrats can't get their act together and say, you know what, we're not going to join air traffic controlling at all, which is going to further extend the delays. I think that we have a safe system because these guys are doing heroic things in the midst of this terrible shutdown, but why do we ask them to do so much without getting paid? Why don't we pay them so that they can be happy, they can do the best job they can do, and they're not worried about feeding their families while they're doing a very important job for all of us? Yeah.
Could you let us know your understanding of the president's comments that he wants to resume nuclear testing after more than 30 years? Does he mean the warheads themselves, the distribution, the missiles, and so forth? What's your understanding of his intention?
Well, look, I'll answer that very briefly, but I really do want to focus on the shutdown that is affecting the American people. I think the president's truth speaks for itself. We have a big arsenal, obviously. The Russians have a large nuclear arsenal. The Chinese have a large nuclear arsenal. Sometimes you've got to test it to make sure that it's functioning and working properly. We've been working very closely, even with nations that we don't have the best relations with, to try to limit nuclear proliferation. The president's going to keep on working on that, but it's an important part of American national security to make sure that this nuclear arsenal we have actually functions properly, and that's part of a testing regime. To be clear, we know that it does work properly, but you got to keep on top of it over time, and the president just wants to make sure that we do that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, I know you said you're going to talk with folks on Capitol Hill after they open the government back up. If this keeps going on, would you consider getting everyone together like you did before the shutdown here at the White House to talk? And just quickly on nuclear, does the new testing make the world less safe?
So I'm not going to answer, I've answered all the questions about nuclear testing that I'm going to answer. I want to talk about the government shutdown here, and I'd like to focus the questions there. But to your point, look, I've never said we're not going to talk to congressional Democrats until they reopen the government. What I've said is we are not going to give in on policy demands under the threat of hostage taking. I mean, if any moderate Democrat or any Democrat period from the United States Senate wants to come over, they're welcome to walk into these doors in an hour. I'm happy to talk to them about how to end the government shutdown, but it's actually very simple because there's a clean CR, as you heard from everybody, that would reopen the government. What we're also saying is that we're not going to allow anybody, Democrat or Republican, to effectively threaten any policy demand and to place that upon reopening the government. You don't reward hostage taking. If Democrats want to talk about healthcare policy, let's talk about healthcare policy. If they want to talk about tax policy, let's talk about tax policy. They don't get to come in here and say, you give us everything we want, or we're going to shut down the government and not pay our pilots and not pay our air traffic controllers. It's ridiculous, disgraceful, irresponsible behavior. There have got to be 5 more moderate Democrats in this entire city who are willing to work with us to reopen the government.
Mr. Vice President, on the issue of the shutdown, there is the concern about 42 million people losing their SNAP benefits.
Of course.
Over this weekend. The administration's moved a lot of money around to pay troops, to pay federal law enforcement, and is telling Congress it can't put money around to pay at least some of those benefits. Why not? Would there be some push perhaps in the next 48 hours to try to do that so Americans don't go hungry?
Well, here's the problem. If you go back to previous government shutdowns, what has happened is that sometimes the president has tried to make the shutdown as painful as possible on the American people. I give the president of the United States great credit and the entire team for trying to make this as painless as possible. The Democrats are acting irresponsibly. He doesn't want the American people to suffer because of it. But look, right now, this government, this administration, we're like guys running around, with a leak in a damn wall, trying to plug it with bubble gum. and we plug one spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum, and we plug another spot with bubble gum. Why don't the Democrats just stop this entire charade and reopen the government so that we don't have to try to make this thing work on a shoestring budget, which is what we're trying to do. The unfortunate reality, and we're starting to see this with our aviation industry, we're going to find out the hard way with SNAP benefits. The American people are already suffering, and the suffering is going to get a lot worse. Not because the President of the United States has failed to make the shutdown painless. He's tried to do everything that he can to make it as unpainless as possible. The reason that pain is coming and the reason it's building is because we're not passing the clean bill to reopen the government. It's a very easy thing to do.
Mr. President.